Hello, good morning, and welcome to Triumph Palace Live. This is Richard Baker, Conservator, and I'm out here in Craven County at the James City, Bryces Creek area, the former estate Claremont, which was part of the Richard Dobbs Spaight Vale family estate. And today we're going to look at the cemetery that is right here at Claremont. This is a 1934 memorial that was set up by one of his descendants on the site of where a larger cemetery was at one time. What we're going to talk about specifically today is the preservation that has occurred to the headstone and some of the other features of the sepulcher itself. So if you'd like to join me, we're going to go right in and start working on that. The gate at the front of the sepulcher was made in the late 19th century. It was falling apart, and so we had a local American marine fabricators restore it in 2016. So talking about Richard Dobbs Spaight, some of you may not know who he is. Richard Dobbs Spaight was a signer of the U.S. Constitution. He was also a governor of the state of North Carolina and the first state governor born in the state of North Carolina. He was also the last state governor in the governor's palace before the capital moved to Raleigh. So he was inaugurated here, and he was the last state governor to do so. He also had a son, Richard Dobbs Spaight Jr., who was the 27th governor of the state of North Carolina. So a family rich in heritage and strength. So the headstone, when this project first started in about 2014, the headstone was on the ground and it was cracked in several places. The surface was very dark from weathering, and the cracks were due to weathering over time. And so we wanted to preserve the headstone, get it off the ground, repair it, and get it into a presentable state so that people could come and see it, pay their respects and see the site of one of the governors of North Carolina. So the first thing that was done, all the conservation work of the headstone was done by James Robertson, who was a stone conservator in Richmond, Virginia. He came down and worked on this project. The first thing that he had to do was get the pieces off the ground. We found that the pieces were actually attached to a brick foundation on the ground level. And so a process is taken to remove those pieces from that. He then had a table actually set up here. Pieces were taken and laid face down on the table. Once all the pieces were collected, then the process began of cleaning the backside of those pieces. There was mortar, there was concrete on the backside of these pieces, and so using chisels and rasps, he was able to clean that excess material off of there, which was what connected it to the brick. Then the next step would be to clean those pieces. And so the pieces were actually taken outside of this enclosure into the grass. He laid out plastic, and the process was of cleaning it. And in order to clean it, he had to use some material that actually, if you make it into a poultice or make it into a solid form, actually coat it onto the stone and let it sit for several hours. And that's the time that it takes to really eat some of these, the things that need the soils and the staining and that sort of thing that need to come out. And some of these required several different times of doing this procedure. So a lot more work was done on cleaning these pieces of marble than, say, the amount of time I spend cleaning a statue. It's also important to note that on the underside of these pieces, he was able to find some of the original points and cutting patterns of the original stone craftsmen who made these pieces. And so he was able to preserve those, keep them in place, because that tells a history of the stone itself, of how it was cut to this form. The next step was to remove the actual mortar, the mortar that held it together. There had been other times that we had found that that the stone had been repaired using concrete, and so he had to remove some of this concrete fills that had been put on. Additionally, the mortar that was in it had to be removed, and he had to use very fine tools to do that, very fine chisels and craft tools. While the cleaning was going on, this plaque was cleaned at the same time. The plaque used to be on a building that was here years ago. They've retained it and put it in the wall. And so a basic marble and lime cleaner was used on the surface to clean this, to remove the stains of weathering, and also to remove any of the grime that had placed into it. And then a bag was placed over, or like a plastic covering was placed over it to protect it from the sunlight and the wind while it cured. And then that was complete. And that took enough time during the time that these pieces were being cleaned outside. So once these pieces were done, the next step was to create for these things to go back together and to go back in the way you see it. If he had just glued the pieces back together and placed them down, there is not enough structure or stability to hold up against time, weathering, that sort of thing. So what he had to do was actually create a backing, a support backing that would stabilize the original headstone. So what he did was he went and got a slab of marble, the same size, and then he took metal, steel metal, made a rectangular shaped structure that bolted to the underside of the slab, and then formed a box crate sort of thing around it to fill in that shape. And that formed basically a stretcher or a foundation, if you will, for this original headstone. So, and additionally, when the marble backing and the headstone were put together, 3 of the corners were gone, were destroyed. This is a corner that remains. And so that it actually comes out to this nice tapered corner. The way this comes out, it would seem that this and the piece below it are all one. But actually this right here is that marble backboard with the structure in the middle on the bottom side. And this is the original headstone. But using the materials that he used, he was able to form this into looking like one piece. And so that's very important to maintain the history as well as the overall appearance of the final piece. So here's an example of one of the areas that was missing from the headstone. And so this had to be rebuilt with some mortar, and then the actual word deposited had to be recrafted, rescripted into that material in order to save that amount of the history. And so, as I said, he had to use some templates to line it up and to put it back in place. Additionally, this is the bronze plaque that used to be located inside the sepulcher. And so in 2018, we removed it from the wall and we sent it out to be refinished. Originally, it is a bronze plaque, but it had over-patinaed too much. And so we really wanted to clean that up. So we sent it out to a metal company, a sign company, Acorn Sign and Graphics in Richmond, and they refinished the plaque to this condition. And with that, we were able to put it on the outside of the sepulcher so people can come and see it, and it won't be where they can't see it on the inside. Additionally, I have spent a little bit of time working on the actual granite of the edges and tops of the sepulcher using the same techniques that I use on the statues in our gardens. And you can see my separate video on cleaning statues on reference and how that was done. Thank you for joining me today here at Claremont to learn about the preservation that has been done here at the burial site. And this concludes our series of TP Live broadcasts on Facebook. Please stay tuned with us for future media content that we might provide on our website and through our social media. Thank you.